Well, good morning. My name is Delaney McKinley, and I'm Senior Director of Government Affairs and Membership for the Michigan Manufacturers Association, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here today for the 2019 Manufacturing Operations Conference. If you have attended MMA events in the past, you'll see some very similar features, like lots of great networking time and great speakers, very good information that you can take back to your facilities and put into practice right away. You'll also notice some new things. We will be in this room for our opening session and for our closing session. But then as you were walking down the hallway, you probably saw several of our breakout rooms where you'll be able to do a little bit deeper dive into some operations issues today. And before we get a little bit further in our day, before we start talking about our content and some housekeeping, we want to explain a little bit why MMA wanted to have an operations conference and focus on operational issues. And so for that, we have a special video from Chuck Hadden, our President and CEO, who was unable to be here today. So let me see if I can get this video going.
Hi, I'm Chuck Hadden, President and CEO of the Michigan Manufacturers Association, and thank you for attending today's operations conference. After the winter we've had this year, it's glad you're getting out and taking advantage of some of these days, and I really want to thank you for being there today. I wish I could be there with you. Over the last 20 years, I've sort of had the privilege of going around and talking to all of you and talking to CEOs in manufacturing and some of the ceilings that they're hitting at different times. And how can we break through some of those ceilings? And they've got a number of operational challenges out there. They struggle with finding local talent. There are regulatory roadblocks that are continually coming up. They have concerns about some of the cybersecurity things that are going on out there. And more than that, there's a lot of new technology out there, mostly in finance, that they're concerned about. That's why we wanted to put this MFG Operations Conference together. It's a way for you to sit down with some thought leaders, some issue specialists, and learn more about these different things that are holding you back. And then you'll walk away with some valuable resources and some new ideas. Now, I know operational challenges don't get solved with you sitting here. You take these ideas back and you implement them and you get involved and you start creating the culture of change that you want to create. But today is the first step. And I want to thank you for making that first step and being part of the Michigan Manufacturers Association. Thank you very much.
Great. As I mentioned, we do have a few housekeeping items that I need to go through. First, I would like to ask the MMA staff who is in the room to stand so I can point you out. We have Brett Garish in the back of the room. We have Brianna Mills here on the side of the room. We have our VP of Government Affairs, Mike Johnston, here in the front of the room. As I mentioned, I am also an MMA staff member. Sarah is back there. Sarah Martin is our events coordinator. And we do have a couple more staff members who are over at our registration desk. We are all available all day to help you with anything you might need. So feel free to approach us if you've got any questions. Bathrooms are located throughout the facility. There are several in the main hallway that you walked past right by the registration area. And as you wander around this facility, it seems a little confusing, but once you just keep walking, you end up finding a lot of bathrooms, a lot of snack and refreshment areas. This place is great for snacks. In the event of an emergency, calmly proceed to the nearest emergency exit unless you're directed otherwise by an MMA staff member or Henry staff member. While you're in the building, there is free public Wi-Fi available. Did I mention snacks? There's a lot of snacks today. There are a couple different areas. Right here, there's a great hub for snacks, but also in the commons area where we'll be having lunch, there's also, throughout the day, refreshments that'll be restocked. So when there's breaks between sessions, there's also lots of great areas throughout the building. If you need to take a phone call, you need to answer some emails, you'll find lots of areas that'll accommodate that. Your program, each of you should have received when you walk in your program. It's kind of your go-to guide, and it includes not only your agenda for today, there's a number of speaker interviews, there's contributed content from our speakers, our sponsors, and other issue experts, lots of room for taking notes, and you can watch for a recap book. So we've got so much content here today that we want to make sure that it continues throughout the year and moves on from today. So there will be videos that will be provided, information from our presentations, key takeaways, contact information, Q&As, and lots more. So keep an eye out for that in the next couple weeks. With the rapid pace of change in today's business environment, we recognize that there's a lot to keep up with. So luckily, we have some great issue experts and specialists and professionals here today that know a lot of these issues inside and out, that they can help give you a leg up on the competition today. Got kind of double fisting things here with technology. We'd like to thank our sponsors for making today possible. We'd like to thank our platinum sponsors, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan and MetLife. Our gold sponsors, Express Employment Professionals, RPI Consultants, and Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, Maynard Casterison, and Freepoint Technologies, Inc. Our breakfast sponsor, and it was delicious, IT Resource. Our registration sponsor is the Manufacturing Technology Mutual Insurance Company, and our event signage sponsor, which we've had a lot of. If you guys saw as you were walking down the hallway, we had a lot of event sponsorship, or excuse me, signage, the Whole Brain Group. Thank you very much. We encourage you to share your thoughts and experiences on social media, whether that's Facebook or Twitter. There's our handles, and please use the hashtag MFGOps19. We'll continue to utilize technology throughout the day. For those of you who have attended MMA events in the past, you probably have utilized Conferences.io. And this is a platform, an interactive tool that we utilize to submit questions and vote on questions that we'll be asking our speakers. All you have to do is use your phone, use your laptop or any other device, go to mimfg.cnf.io. And when you're there, you can click the Ask button if there's a question you want to ask of any of our panelists. You can also upvote, so there's an arrow there that you can click on if there are other questions that others are asking that you think is a good question. Usually what we do is we ask the panelists in our opening and closing session the most popular, the most requested questions. So if you're upvoting things, it's more of a likelihood that that question will get asked. We'll do our very best to answer all of the questions that we have today, but in the event that we don't, we will be getting to those in that post-event recap book that I mentioned. We'll make sure that your questions are answered one way or another at some point. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Mike Johnston, our VP of Government Affairs and Membership, for our first panel.
Thank you, Delaney, and thank you all for being here. So this is an ops conference. We've packed you all in a room. It's really informal. We're going to talk about successes. We're going to talk about how to make your business better. And what I want to do is start out today with a panel called Operational Lessons Learned: Stories of One Manufacturer's Journey to Success. But the subcategory is Partnerships for Success. So we have with us today Jim Richards from Total Security Solutions, and on the other end, Bob George from Total Security Solutions, Dania Dunlop-Hurden from the Whole Brain Group, and Marissa Smith from Traction Training Center. So this is really Jim's story, but in November of last year, MMA awarded the John G. Thodas Manufacturer of the Year Award, small tier, to Jim Richards, who is CEO of the Total Security Systems. We'll call it TSS from now on. Jim is the first guy to tell you he didn't do it on his own, and took a tremendous amount of partnerships and worked with peers and consultants and sort of outside influences to grow. Each time Jim hit a ceiling, he took a look at the problem, what does it take to solve it, but more importantly, who can help us solve that problem? And that's kind of what's launched him into being Manufacturer of the Year. So let's get started by kind of hearing more about how TSS got started. I understand you started that company with your dad.
Yeah, we were working in a related business, I guess 15, 16 years ago now. My dad had originally owned that business, and it was a business I grew up in. My dad was adamant that I wasn't going to come to work for him, niche business at the time. And basically what we do is anything physical security wise to stop bullets. So if you wanted to make those windows behind you bullet resistant, or any of these walls or doors for commercial applications, we do that nationwide. And so at the time, 20 years, 25 years ago when I was growing up, it was a pretty small industry. I went to college. Didn't really get that great a job out of college, so I basically begged him to come back to work for him until I figured out what I wanted to do. And so he was smart enough to bounce me around the business, to different aspects of the business, just to learn everything. And one day we got a call. The business was sold to GE Plastics. My dad was 56, 57 at the time, and it became real clear that there wasn't going to be anybody 56 or 57 in the new business that they were forming. So we decided that he wasn't done working and I didn't want to work for a big business. So we partnered up. He wanted to work 5 or 6 more years. I wanted a business on my own, and so we went in business together, and he took care of the day-to-day, and I learned, you know, the shop floor, takeoffs, engineering, all that stuff that was needed early on. First couple years we had 9 employees, and then we kind of started steadily growing, but slowly growing from there.
Okay, so let's talk about growth. One of the first things you did, you started looking at marketing and moving forward with marketing. So tell me how marketing helped launch growth.
So when we started the business, our main core group was financial institutions. So we did all of like Wells Fargo's work, Chase's work, Bank of America, and we still do a lot of that work today. It was what we knew and it was easy for us. So we just did banks, and then we did more banks, and then we did more banks, and we got good at banks. And so then it realized that, you know, if we have a recession or something, we need to do something different here. So my wife at the time was working for a pretty large advertising agency in Grand Rapids. Some of their customers were like Stryker, Herman Miller, Hayworth, things like that. So I partnered with them and had them design us a website, because that's what I guess I thought you needed at the time. You got to have a website. And so then I started slowly paying for some clicks and doing some things, and we were actually generating some business from that.
So I have to, you told me a story that you worked with your wife and then it didn't go well.
So
You had to fire your wife, didn't you?
yeah. So we were spending a lot of money, a significant amount of money, and it was all, at the time, I was second generation in our industry, and I just felt that there had to be more out there. And so they were pushing the trade shows and the print media and brochures, and I was getting some clicks, but it seemed like we were going through our click budget like that, and I was getting 3-4 leads a month, which at first was impressive. Like, I'm like, wow, there's people calling us from other part of the country to buy bulletproof glass. But I just felt there had to be more out there. So I started making some calls, and I called a company in California, I called a company in Indianapolis, left messages, and then I called a company, and unfortunately we're in East Lansing here, but they were in Ann Arbor.
Go blue.
Yeah, and they actually answered the phone. Somebody actually answered the phone, and so we started talking and going through, and it was at the beginning of the pay-per-click stuff, and she seemed like she knew what she was talking about. I happened to be the owner that answered the phone. And so I decided that I was going to make a wholesale switch. And so I had to have quite a bit of confidence in my wife's capability, because I completely walked away from their company and went with this other company. And it was expensive. And I just talked to my dad and I said, give me 3 months. And if it's not working, we'll cut it off, we'll do whatever, and we'll figure out something else to do. And I think by 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, the phone was ringing off the hook. And I don't want to say we didn't look back, but it created a lot of other problems that we're going to get into and talk about going forward, but it was a good problem to start with.
So what we're talking about is inbound marketing.
Yeah, this was the early phases. So we were just, at that time, we were just doing pay-per-click,
Okay.
which is part of inbound marketing, yeah.
Yeah. Marissa, did you want to take off on that and talk a little bit more about inbound marketing and how that works?
Yeah. Well, so we were not the company that he initially called, but that company then brought in the marketing agency, which I still own, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day of that anymore. But that is the Whole Brain Group. And so they wanted us to help build a website that was more built for converting, right? So instead of just having kind of a brochure site that really, as people came into the site, they would have a place to, fill in a form, they'd get something in return, so we could actually be collecting contact information, not just kind of bouncing around and then, people would leave. And so we came in and built the website, and based on all the traffic that Jim was getting and the clicks they were getting, we realized that they really weren't building up a list of people that they could continue to market to, that there was an opportunity to take that even further. And this was right when kind of inbound marketing was getting going. It was a new methodology, and it was really more about developing great content and showcasing your expertise so that you could stand apart from the other people in the industry. And so Jim decided he really wanted to become the destination, right, the resource center for all things bulletproof, and decided to make an investment in building up that reputation. And so we really just developed a long-term strategy of what it would take to build all the educational content that he needed to be able to help people make a decision to, educate themselves about all the questions that they had, make decisions, move them kind of down the funnel towards actually deciding to buy from Total Security Solutions. So it was a long-term strategy, and over time they built that up, and now 4 or 5 years later, if you go and look at their website today, there's videos and checklists and downloads and all kinds of stuff that just we had to build that over time.
Can you describe more what inbound marketing is?
Sure. So the general idea is that instead of going to people, that you're having them come to you, right? So people are out there searching for things, and you want to be found when they are searching for those keywords or the questions that they have. And when they find you, you want to be able to answer their questions, right? So the idea is that you really have to put yourselves in the buyer's shoes and think about, okay, what questions do they have? What information are they looking for? How can we answer their questions and show that we are the ones who have the answers, so that when they're ready to buy, they come to us for the solution. And so you guys were really moving from like more of a transactional
I just wanted
basis.
Leads when we started.
He just wanted leads, right?
So we evolved into this,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It was, when I started this, I just wanted leads. I wanted people calling us.
Right.
And then once you get people calling you, you want the right people calling you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because then you realize real quick that you're doing a ton of free consulting, or your salespeople are spending the majority of their day quoting and trying to sell stuff that we don't want to quote or we don't want to sell. So it was a gradual process working with Marissa of, how do we go from me just being consumed by leads and wanting leads, because I equated that early on, that's how we were going to get more sales. And then through time, Marissa was like, well, what is your closing rate? What are you doing with these leads?
Right.
How are you making sure you can get back in touch with these people? How do you market to these people?
Right.
But early on, it was just, I think when we were talking, when we were out there, we literally had our leads coming into my inbox and putting them in a folder, and then the salespeople would call them. And then we, through pure visibility, we started utilizing Salesforce and tracking and capturing all that data, and then through that it evolved into the, we want to get people at their early buying stages so we can shape their decision-making process.
Right. Instead of waiting till they're ready to buy, and then they really, it's more transactional. So we developed some content offers. The first thing we did was we talked to the sales team about, what are the questions that so they're getting all these phone calls. They're spending all this time on the phone, and Bob was saying, well, I don't have time to write up quotes because I'm spending all this time answering questions. And we said, well, what questions do people have? And then we came up with an infographic that was the ultimate guide to bulletproof glass. And it was this big, giant graphic that had all of, what are the levels of security, and basically answering all of the questions that people had. So we put that up on the website, and we sent out an email to, they had a database of thousands of people that they hadn't really been communicating with, and sent an email to all of those people, and suddenly Jim's phone was buzzing, right? Because all of these people were downloading the infographic, and then the sales team was able to use that. If somebody had a question, they could say, well, let me send you this resource. It'll answer a lot of your questions, and then they would come back with the more sophisticated questions, so that really they're spending more time with people who are more qualified to buy instead of all the kind of window shoppers, right? And so that was the first infographic or first content offer we created, and then we kind of built from there. So.
But it's interesting that
Yeah.
you started this inbound marketing, started to go well, you had significant growth, but then you had operational issues. Oh my God, now we've got to respond to this.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what do you do with growth?
Yeah, we took off, I think we went from just under $8 million in revenue when we started this. And I think we talked about this before. I thought we were ready to go. And so we went from a little under $8 million in revenue in 1 year to like 12.5 million in revenue the next year. And we got about 4 months in, and I give it to the equation of that I was running up that hill, and this is what we had been waiting for, and we were ready to go, and this is going to be awesome. And then I looked behind, and everybody stopped at the bottom of the hill. And we didn't have any messaging. We didn't have a vision. We didn't have a plan. We didn't roll any of this stuff out to any of our employees that we were actually going to try to grow the business. And we didn't have anybody that wanted to grow the business. And so we got through that year, barely. And I don't think, our customers didn't really feel the effect of it, but it really damaged, I guess, the infrastructure and the culture of the business. And so I remember sitting in Marissa's office like, yeah, this was a success. We did this, but I don't know if we can do it again, you know what I mean? And so we started writing all of the operational issues on Post-its. And it became evident that we had to tackle all of these things before we could try to market anymore or grow anymore. And so that's when it kind of shifted, and I was fortunate enough that I was actually paying like my marketing company and other people that I knew to help me operationally. So for a period of time we kind of paused the marketing and we started working on operational issues. We didn't have a leadership, I was a leadership team. We didn't have an organizational chart.
Didn't have core values.
We didn't have core values. We didn't have like interview questions. We didn't have anything, and I thought we were doing just fine. And so we slowly started picking away. At times I had outside resources, paid outside people were sitting on my leadership team until I could develop leaders. And we kind of slowly started picking away, and then we would go again. And I think we went from 12.5 million to 15 million or 15.5 once we felt like we had some footing, and then we reevaluated again. What's working, what's not working, and we've been just slowly building that operational side out.
Yeah, so you have these growing pains and you're figuring it out operationally. You've grown pretty fast early, but then you need help from your peers. I mean, you did some outreach, you did some learning from others. Talk about that.
Sometime during there, I won the Michigan 50 Businesses to Watch. One of those, I was nominated from one of those and went to the event here in Lansing. And so there must have been a list that was generated. And so I must have been looking for something, a peer group. I was trying to pull anybody I could in. At that time, I had pulled in an outside consultant. We came out of one of those meetings that, hey, we need to get somebody that I could talk to, mentor. And I wanted somebody, I knew what to do, we just didn't have enough resources. So I brought him in. He was working on the sales side of the business, developing the sales process and things like that. And then I got a knock on the door one day, and it was a chair for tech, which now is the same thing as Vistage. And he was, an older gentleman was standing out at the front door, and he had this one page or whatever. He's like, yeah, you probably don't want to hear my spiel, but I'm like, yeah, sure, come on in. And I must have been looking for something, you know what I mean? And so he gave me his 25-minute spiel and just said, come to a meeting, see if you like it. And the fortunate part was it was all manufacturers that was in his group. So it was people that were further along than where I was. Some people were at the end of their careers and had 6 businesses, 7 businesses. Some people were a couple years ahead of me, and some people were kind of right where I was at. So I started joining tech now, which is Vistage. Some of the people that are in here today were members of that. And that was a significant boost to us being able to shore up things operationally, because you could bring your questions, your issues, your concerns, and you could talk about them in private, and people had suggestions, and there was no hidden agendas. And that was a significant help.
So you reached out to others for input, didn't just rely on yourself and think you're the smartest guy in the room, though you might have been, but when you're alone, that's it's not impressive, frankly.
Well, so, and I kind of could see, it's been neat to see, because I've known Jim for a long time now, the transformation from being kind of that solo entrepreneur trying to figure it out all for himself to then asking for help and becoming part of this peer group. And then I could really see, and you talked to me about this too, it's like you realized you needed to become more of a CEO, right? That you really had to transform and mature in some ways, right, and grow as a leader. And so it's been really interesting to see how when you're only in your own business all day long, you don't know what other people are doing, right? So when you come to events like this, or you're part of a peer group, you start to go, oh, I didn't know you could do that, or that's a great idea, and you start to bring all those ideas. And so a lot of, I think, how your vision has evolved, a lot of that's from seeing what other people are doing. And so, to me, watching that transformation, I can see the influence that, all of that being open to knowing that you don't know everything, right? And being willing to grow is really important.
Right, but then you start to put some operational systems in place.
Right. Well, so he and I also kind of had this peer relationship, right? So even though, I owned the marketing firm that he hired, we were in some ways, we were growing, I was growing my marketing company at the same time, struggling with some of the same hitting the ceiling kind of issues. I was involved in every little part of my business, and I was trying to figure out how to scale. And so I had found a system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is EOS, and we were starting to use it in the marketing company, and we were starting to run our marketing meetings with TSS using this, standard meeting agenda and all this stuff. And he saw some of the impact that was having on Whole Brain Group, and he said, I think maybe I want to do some of that in my company. Can you help me with the vision and getting the accountability chart, put in place? And so, that's when we sat down with all those Post-it notes and stuff and started to. I kind of snuck it in on you, though.
Yeah, I was going to say I wasn't an early adopter, but when you try things your way for a while and it doesn't work, then you get willing to try something different.
Right.
So yeah, they did it for a while, almost a year in the marketing, and then I wasn't involved in sales at that point that much. I was just kind of overseeing it. So then I let them do it, and our sales was our first organization, part of our organization that did it. So we kind of tiered it as we rolled it out. But then once I saw it working, and we run it now, and it works well, and it's been a huge benefit. But for whatever reason, I'm huge on change in our organization, as long as it doesn't affect me. So I understand the need for it, and I drive it consistently, but I'm not usually an early adopter. So it's been a challenge, but it definitely has worked with EOS.
Yeah, so as you evolved, you kind of hit another ceiling. You realize, as CEO, you've got some good input, you're evolving, you're growing, but you can't do it all. So what'd you do at that point?
That was when we started bringing people into the business, really making a conscious effort. At some point in time, I think we were 15, 16 million, and we still didn't have a director's, it was me. And when you looked at the organizational chart, I was sitting in like 6 seats. So I brought in the outside consultant that helped with the sales side of the business. I brought in a director of admin. At that time, my mom was still working part-time in the business, and she was keeping the books. And people were driving me that, well, you gotta have a CFO, you gotta have a CFO. And we were, I'm a pretty private person. Nobody ever had seen the books or done anything. And we were talking at that point about early stages of open book finance, and I'm like, that's not ever gonna happen. And so they talked me into getting a part-time CFO. And so again, we brought in another outside resource. So basically I went to Michigan CFO on the east side of the state, met with them. They found me a CFO that would work in my business 2 days a week. Again, I wanted to try it for a little bit before I committed to something. And I got to know her. She was a great person. We connected well. We bonded great. I started trusting her, and then she walked in one day after about a year and said, I hate to tell you this, but my other customer gave me an ultimatum. Either I go to work for them full time, or they're going to fire me, and they're 5 minutes from my house. And I'm like, oh. And so Todd comes out, and he's like, don't worry, I got a resource. I'm like, I don't want a resource. You know what I mean? I want Jennifer. You know what I mean? We were just starting to do great things here. You had to tell me how I had to trust somebody and do all this stuff. And I did all this stuff, and then she leaves. So he's like, don't worry, I got somebody. And so he brought in my current CFO, who I have subsequently hired full-time. And he was at a huge company and ended up being a stakeholder in the company and then sold it. wants to keep working, doesn't need to keep working, is about 10 times the resource that I need, works 3.5 days a week and I don't. I mean, once you see it and understand it, you know, the first time that I sat, we're just finishing up building a building. First time I sat in with the bank with him, like, he was kind of deferring to me. And I was kind of looking at him like, you know, you're the one that's supposed to be talking to the bank, you know what I mean? And so then all of a sudden he started talking and asking them questions, and I'm like, yep, I don't need to talk to the bank anymore. So when you have the right resources and you pull in the right people, it can have a tremendous impact on your business.
So let me still talk a little bit more about growth and the marketing growth, and we'll get Danny and Bob involved. So, enormous amount of sales coming in, you're growing really fast, you're like the 17 million in growth in 2015, but that's growth. What do you guys do with it, right?
Oh, go ahead.
You want me to go
Start with
ahead?
the marketing.
Okay, well, from the marketing perspective, when I came on the scene, it was about 5 years ago, a little less than 5 years ago, and I came to the table with some manufacturing and engineering experience. So I spent some time as a quality manager and a business process manager in manufacturing and engineering companies, growing up, if you will, in businesses. And when I came on board, I was really trying to look for how do you take marketing and look at the return on investment. Many of you in the manufacturing world, I know that this has been a common thing, is think that marketing is this big black hole where all your money goes and you don't know, does it work? And so that's not how I think. And when I came to the table, it was more looking at the performance of the marketing system and how do we take that and turn it into an engine that can perform on a regular basis and provide results, provide tangible results that we can then tie to the bottom line. And so having been in the quality realm, I thought about the marketing program as a system and how does that system interrelate with the sales team. And so Bob and I created a very close relationship so that we could communicate back and forth on issues that were affecting sales and how can the marketing team respond to that. Doing that as well as really focusing on the performance metrics and using the data to drive decisions on how we refine the marketing engine was really helpful. Jim's been really great because he really knows his business and he definitely has a marketing bent to him because he's come up with some great taglines, if you will. One of the things was customization, customer service, and speed. Those were the 3 pillars by which we could build our marketing messaging. And Jim came up with that. I didn't come up with it. We also focused on understanding the ideal job and the ideal clients with those jobs and really focusing our marketing around not just getting the volume of leads, but getting specific kind of leads that we're going to translate into the kind of business. And one of the coolest things that I saw in the process was when we defined that ideal job, they were doing very much transactional work, and Jim's like, no, we do customized stuff, and we do beautiful work. So the team at Whole Brain Group kind of came together and said, how can we market this? And so we changed the messaging, and the messaging really focused on being able to do this customization and do it faster than anyone in the market, and then providing outstanding customer service. And then over the course of a year and a half, the business problem shifted. And it shifted from having just the volume of jobs and Bob's team having to sort the wheat from the chaff to bringing in people that wanted more consulting, that wanted bigger types of jobs. And I think I'm going to let Bob talk about what that impact was on him, because we went from having this problem of having too many leads that were more transactional to having leads that needed more time on the phone, and that changed the sales process. So communicating with Bob and understanding what was going on with them, not only with what's going on with the business, was really fundamental in helping them be able to grow and get the job size up from X to X times 20 or X times 30. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bob and let him talk to you a little bit about what impact that had on him.
Yeah, no, I got it.
You got it? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So, like Danya said, and they spoke about it earlier, the marketing campaign became very tactical. So the leads started to grow, but we had to learn how to start managing them. We had to start qualifying better. And on top of that, people were coming in more educated because of the marketing campaign. So we had to figure out qualifying questions to really figure out what were the good leads from the bad leads. So we had to start taking a more consultative approach. I mean, we were used to doing banks and gas stations. Next thing you know, we're doing work at the Pentagon. So we knew right away we had to figure this out. So we basically started digging deeper. We knew everyone has a need for security. That's why they're calling. But we wanted to figure out, something that would really help them, figure out what their needs were, develop a solution that worked for them. In order to do all this, because we're getting all these leads that are coming in, we're trying to manage them, and we had a Salesforce, as was our CRM tool that we talked about earlier, as far as how you're going to collect the leads, but we had thousands of leads. We didn't know what to do with them. So we had to start using Salesforce to the fullest extent. We started doing pipeline management, forecasting, really to start gathering all this information that we were getting.
I think what's also significant in the relationship with Bob and myself is that being able to communicate what's going on in the sales department and marketing being able to respond to that. So an example that I can use is last February there was that big school shooting that was down in Florida, and leads quadrupled overnight. And so they have the same sales team and they're getting quadruple the amount of calls. What do you do with that? And the calls that were coming in were not in their ideal client profile. These were people that were reacting to the situation. So what do you do about that? How can they manage their sales department? And so by talking to Bob and understanding what the problem was, the marketing team actually went and found a way to filter out those leads while still paying homage to the fact that they had valid questions and concerns, because in the day of digital marketing and social media, you can't just push people off. You could get killed in social media. So we really thought long and hard about how we were going to address that. So we created a content piece that was actually for people, parents and teachers, who were never really going to buy from TSS, but answered their questions about how to get their schools to be safer. And that was a great way to kind of put a barrier between the market and the sales team, so that we could get them out of the sales funnel, but do it in a way that was respectful, so that the sales team could focus on the true leads that came into the organization. And Bob, I don't know if you want to talk about how that worked.
Yeah, I mean, we got to the point where we couldn't really do our day-to-day work because there were so many leads coming in. This was like last February. So you wanted to be sensitive to it because it was, a tough situation. Obviously, what happened down there, you didn't want to just, ignore people. But we had to come to Danya and say, look, we need to create something so the people that are coming to the website know, okay, here's some information. Because like Jim said, we were doing free consulting. There were no sales out of it, but again, you wanted to be sensitive about it and not blow people off. So we turned to Whole Brain Group, and Danya did a great job of creating a piece that really, took away like all these just random calls that were coming in, and we're educating people. So that free consulting was being done through the website with content pieces. And then when they kind of matured through to the bottom of the funnel, then we were getting them when people had actual projects.
And I'm going to caveat that by saying that he said Danya, but it really is, I have a team of fantastic people behind me that are helping create all this content. We actually came together and brainstormed, but thank you for the credit.
Oh, you're welcome. You guys did a great job.
Thanks.
It might be worth, it's an interesting story how you decided your company is about customization and installation, and how you're different in the marketplace. Just to give some context, to put some real stories around what it is you guys do in the marketplace.
I figured years ago, and it was just kind of the way I guess I grew up, or the business that I grew up in before or whatever. We always focused on custom work, and it might have been fairly simplistic at the time, but it's really benefited us, because the way I looked at it, the tougher the project, first we're going to eliminate more and more competitors. And that's what we've always done. We've just thrived in that customization, you know what I mean? And I mean, we had one job that we bent the glass for a job in Chicago. And so literally we wrapped ballistic glass all the way around this big, and we created the steel structure below and the doors. We have a big job in Coronado for the naval base right now, where the glass is leaning out on angles and different things like that. But we've just really, and we do a ton of transactional work because of the website, but we're really hawking those projects that nobody else wants to. And it seems like it's something that our organization kind of takes pride in. In the last year or two with the marketing, we've kind of reached that threshold where at times we have to pause and say, do we really want to get into this project? And then when we're having those heated conversations, Bob reminds me that, It is one of our 3 uniques is customization, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's tough to keep up with it because we're always pushing the envelope, because we're constantly taking on projects that nobody else has done before. So you don't have any engineering, you don't have any specs, you don't have anything. You're required to figure that out as you go. And then if something's wrong, you're required to fix that as well. But yeah,
But you still have to have a process that underlies all of that, right? So even though it's custom, so you're not just churning out widgets, right? But you still have to do that, information gathering in the same way, and then engineer the project and project management. And that was all stuff that in the beginning, because it was more transactional, they didn't have any of that, right? So you've had to really develop that and bring the right people in and train them and transfer the history that's in his head into these people. And, when the sales and marketing is working, like you said earlier, that creates other problems that you then have to solve as well. So good problems, but
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Challenges,
And you were
right.
telling me earlier that you were getting requests for aquariums.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to say, well, maybe, or
Yeah.
maybe not.
yeah.
hockey rinks, aquariums,
Yeah.
we've seen
Zoos.
libraries. We've put we did a big project for Harvard. We put ballistic glass. The only one that I think we've ever walked away from is up at the Arctic Circle, there's a naval base or a military base. And I was adamant that I don't think the glass would stop bullets that cold. It gets to like 55 below. And I'm like, we can't perform the test for one. So we can't validate whether this stuff will actually stop a bullet or not. So we're not going to put ballistic glass in for the federal government unless we can validate it.
But if we have another polar vortex, you can do that, so you'll be prepared for next time, so we'll be all right.
But your place in the marketplace is that customization and not,
Yep.
I mean, you say there's more.
We still have, probably
There's other
40% of our business is still transactional, but we're still trying to continually to grow that custom side. And then we install anywhere. We just had a crew this past weekend get back from St. Kitts. They were down there for 2 weeks. But we'll install anywhere in pretty much the world. We were looking at some opportunities in Greece last year and sent some people over there to explore that. But so we take, and that's really us trying to control as much of the package as possible. So over the years, we've tried to outsource different things on the manufacturing side, but mill workers can't typically keep up with our lead time, so we have our own mill shop. We have our own steel shop. We have our own stainless steel department, our own aluminum. So we fabricate everything in-house, and then we try to control as much of the project as possible. So we'll offer installation, probably 40% of what we do we install anywhere in the country. And it's either out of Michigan or our California office. And we'll go out and take field measurements, we'll do all of the engineering in-house, and then we'll punch out the jobs.
But thematically, within your company, you've kind of learned that you can't do it all. The lesson I take away is you needed to let go, take information and insight from Marissa, other peer groups, Dania, others.
Yeah, about maybe 5 years ago now. I lose track of time. I had to make a conscious effort and decision to become the CEO. I still today on a daily basis, don't view myself as the CEO. I'm still managing, I'm down to one department that I'm managing. I can't find a lead for that department, so I still sit in on those meetings. But I'm an operations guy. That's really what I am. That was driven up into the CEO role and understand the need for it. But I spent a lot of years coming to work in a pair of blue jeans and a t-shirt and a hat. Because at some point in the day, if the guy on the saw didn't show up, I was out on the saw, cutting on the saw or doing whatever. If we got behind in packing, I would help in packing. And then you understand that the business doesn't need that. They need, leadership, direction. I remember going around and around about why we needed a 3-year vision. I know where we're going. You know what I mean? Isn't that good enough? You know what I mean? But that's making that conscious decision from being an entrepreneur to a CEO. Because you understand at some point when today, I hired 2 people yesterday, so we just crossed 60 employees. They don't need an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs, like, I'll talk to Marissa as an entrepreneur, or other people outside of my business as an entrepreneur. But when I act like an entrepreneur in my business, it just exhausts people. It just wears them out. So I have to, as a CEO, I have to be patient. I have to be understanding. I have to give people time to learn. We had to create a university that all of our new hires, because I used to like to give everybody, like, probably our onboarding was about 3 weeks, and then we would cut them loose, and then I couldn't figure out why in 3 months they would leave, you know what I mean? Like, they just couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
You know, they just couldn't hack it. But so we created a university and a curriculum, and basically all that university is me on video talking about different aspects of the business and what they need to know to be successful. But that was probably a 5-year effort of trying to get as much information and knowledge out of my head.
Yeah, that's what I took away. One of the amazing transformation for you is you have this entrepreneurial brain, you're going 1,000 miles an hour, you see where you're going, but as you said earlier, you got out there and there was no one behind you. So you needed systems and help to say, well, how do you bring everybody else along who maybe doesn't have the entrepreneurial brain?
Right. And a lot of entrepreneurs run into that, right? I mean, you can see it clearly. You're the visionary, right? You know where you're going, but everybody can't read your mind, unfortunately, right? And a lot of times people think, well, I told them once, right? So they should get it, right? But you got to tell people over and over again. Now you have a new group of people in there, and they haven't heard it 7 times yet. And so just kind of systemizing that and boiling stuff down to those, 3 uniques and just a couple of, 5 core values, and just, really getting that system put in place so that then you can communicate it more clearly. And then it's not just Jim who communicates it, it's everybody on the leadership team and the managers. And so now you've got everybody out there saying the same thing. You're much more likely to have that success than if it's one guy kind of dragging people up the hill. So I think that's where, the EOS stuff has helped you kind of get that out of your head and into a system.
And it helps people make that decision,
Right.
whether or not they want to keep going. And so when I look at our growth trajectory, we usually grow for 2 years, take a year off. Grow for 2 years, take a year off. And then that off year we evaluate. I do a lot of evaluation personally, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do better. But it gives the employees a chance to evaluate as well. Do they want to keep going? Because not everybody wants to keep going. Not everybody wants to grow every day, be pushed every day. But if you have that vision and you're communicating that, or where we're going, what we're trying to accomplish, they can make that decision. And we've had some people leave over the years, and it's good people, but they decided to do something different or change their careers, or they just didn't want to go any further.
Well, and the people who come with you to the $8 million mark may not be the people who can take you to the $20 million mark, or want to, as you said. So you said, when you got to the top of the hill, you look back and realize that the people who were in the company didn't want to grow, right? They didn't want to change, they didn't want to learn, and so you're not going to be able to make them want it, right? But if you bring people in and you've got a clear vision and you express it to them, they're either in or they're out, right? And so you're hopefully going to attract more people who are like, yes, that's where I want to go. And if they don't want to go there, you won't even start, they won't come on the bus to begin with, right? So it's just the transition is hard when you've got people who have been there, and now you're going here, and then what do you do with the team that maybe isn't ready to go to that next level, right? Can be a harder. Yeah.
So you've actually implemented some other operational things like the DISC assessment. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah.
So that was we brought in another outside resource,
Yeah.
A company called Edgewise, and a lady called Michelle Laxis, and we did some early DISC trainings. And again, I wasn't an early adopter. We did some.
Does everybody know what DISC is, by the way? I mentioned it like everybody knows what it is.
It's people's personalities, from what I understand and know. You got the D's, the I's, the S's, and C's. The C's are the analytical people.
D is dominant.
Yeah, I'm
I's.
like way over here on the left in the corner of the D. And so we've done a lot of DISC training, and we get reports and we do events and functions on how people need to communicate with each other. How do you communicate with the C? How do you understand their perspective? Because we have all of these different departments. So you have sales that tries to go in and talk to our engineers, and then they get frustrated because the engineers talk like engineers do because they're C's. and the salespeople talk like the salespeople do, and then it's just nothing ever gets done. So we've spent a lot of time focusing on that and understanding that people are different. They have different perspectives. They view information differently. They need more time to make decisions. And then we've spent a tremendous amount of time and money on training people on how to communicate with me. So that's probably the biggest investment that we've made in the business. I'm very bullet point. If you send me more than 4 sentences in an email, I just hit delete on the email, and I just keep moving. So it's, if somebody comes in and wants to go over something with me, how do you make sure that you get, they might have the best idea in the world, but if it's going to take me 45 minutes to get through that idea, I made the decision at 4 minutes or 3 minutes, you know what I mean? So I've moved on. And so once people started understanding that it's not that I don't think your idea is a good idea, I don't think that you have value to contribute, I have the information I need, you know what I mean? Make the decision, move on, what's next? And so that's helped quite a bit, and it's helped in our, so we've done that with all of our job profiles. And so we've actually profiled all of our jobs in the organization. Now you have to keep in mind, 6 years ago we didn't have job descriptions for the entire organization. So we have job descriptions, plus now we have job profiles. We've allocated the amount of time that people do those functions. And so then now when we bring in hires, we test them through those assessments and to job match them to whether or not they will be. And so from what I've been told, there's greens, blues, yellows, and reds, and obviously the reds are the worst. But if you can get no yellows and reds on these assessments that we give them, you have about a 93% chance that person will be successful in that job. And again, I was an early adopter. I'd see somebody I'd like, and because I sit in on the final interviews, you know what I mean? And everybody's like, yeah, I don't know about this. He didn't test that great, whatever, and I'd be like, yeah, well, I like him, you know what I mean? We're going to hire him. And then he's gone in 6 months, and so, okay, well, what's the assessment say after a while, I would say, you know what I mean? Let's start looking at the assessments a little closer.
You keep saying you're not an early adopter, but that's not true. In marketing, one of the things that Jim's been willing to do is to test and to try things. And I think that's been part of why he's been able to see success in marketing, is that he's not afraid to try things and to say, yeah, I'll throw some money at that, we'll give it a try. And if it doesn't work, then we try something different or we can refine the strategy. But he keeps saying he's not an early adopter.
As long as it doesn't affect me.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll agree with that.
I qualify that. I understand we do all kinds of stuff in the organization to try stuff, but
But if you have to try it.
yeah.
Right.
Yep. Like we just switched over yesterday. We're getting off track here a little bit, but we switched to Ring Central and VoIP phones, and I was all gun-ho until they started training me yesterday on how to use it, you know what I mean? So, and I was the last one to get trained, and I think there's a reason for that.
So you've made a lot of changes. You've implemented a lot of different stuff. What would you say was what made the biggest difference operationally?
Was it last year, Bob, we started with Arbase?
Yeah, or end of 2017
Yeah.
into 18, but we
So
implemented in 18.
So at one point in time, we were using Salesforce, and we priced through there with a platform called Conga. We had Excel spreadsheets. We had a legacy database system from like the 90s. Like I took it from our last place stop and pirated it with us as we went. And Trello, and there was a couple other things.
Project management, yeah. QuickBooks.
QuickBooks, this, that. We had like 15 different applications that we were running to try to keep track of jobs. And we had all our jobs in paper folders. So we had a wall, and it was probably from that door to that door down there that had all of our jobs on there. And we had a sign-out sheet. And if you took a job, you were supposed to sign your name on the thing where it was. And we spent hours looking for jobs. Who has that job? Where's it at? Whether it was sales doing a change order or a reprice, or the engineers were engineering it. And so then I brought in like Microsoft Dynamic, Oracle, all these people, and sat and listened to their spiels. And everybody wanted us to structurally change our business to fit their software. And I'm like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? We're just too special and too unique. And so I said, well, why don't we call the guy that this R-based software originally was from and bring him in here and see what he could do. And he came in on a Friday, and I basically told him what I wanted to do. And I think he was probably similar to me because he told me all these things he could do, and come to find out afterwards he had never done it before. But he spent the whole weekend in a hotel room like doing mock-ups of what it would look like one of our jobs flowing through our organization. It was back Monday morning in my office. And I saw enough, and so I wrote him a check for probably, it was half down, it was probably $250,000 to start. And we have integrated, so from I don't want to go away from Salesforce and Conga. So when they're still in Salesforce, they price all their jobs. When they sell it, it automatically flows into our database system now. It's all there as new jobs, all the information, all the pricing, all the line item pricing, everything's there. And it flows all the way through. We run our shipping out of there. We run everything out of that. Engineering, our project management, we have dashboards and all these things. So we're down, and then it automatically exports out into QuickBooks and automatically creates the invoice. So we don't, we've gone from probably a couple hundred keystroke commands, functions, down to maybe 10. Now it's one of those things you learn. We won't ever be done because we're on 2.5 now, and I already have plans for 3.0, and our inventory will be in there, and barcoding, that's not done yet, and stuff like that. But that revolutionized our business and our industry. Nobody's doing that, and so we're pretty much we're moving into a new facility next month, and by the end of the year we'll be paperless. Whereas as of April last year, we still have some jobs that are on the rack that haven't gone yet. There's like 5 jobs sitting there that we look at once in a while, and we'll probably keep the last paper job. You know what I mean, just as memento.
Yeah.
Just to cling a little.
Yep.
Yeah, good. So when we were talking earlier, we talked about something that you strategically ignored. So what is it that you have strategically ignored?
Well, so I think that came from, so when you are using EOS, right, the entrepreneurial operating system, a lot of it is about compartmentalization, right? So you've got your vision, and you have to prioritize. You can't do everything all at once, right? So you're going here, there's 100 things standing in your way from getting from where you are to where you're going. And you really have to pick 3 to 7 priorities to just work on at any given time and strategically ignore everything else, right? So there are things that you just can't solve at a particular time. I think that's where that phrase came from. So is there anything that you have said, just kind of go la 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 la, we can't deal with that right now, but eventually then it starts to, you can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, what I sort of
Our
think,
base might have been one of those,
Yeah.
right? There was a long time where you were like, I just can't go there, right? But then there's a point at which you just can't ignore it anymore, so.
Yeah, probably this year it was, we still don't have one centralized spot where all our information is.
Yeah.
But I hired a process engineer, and so we finally we're tackling that. That's probably been a 3-year thing that I just haven't wanted to deal with. Because the engineers have their drives, salespeople have their data sheets. So we're one of those companies, when you make a change, we make this one change over here, and then it doesn't affect, the other 100 people in the organization, and then they find out about it 6 months later. But now we have a person that we send out a weekly newsletter. Hey, we made this change, or we want everybody to be aware that this is a new process or a procedure, how it affects you. But that drive, or not having that drive for a long period of time, has really affected us. We were selling, sales was selling glass that we stopped making like a year or 2 ago or whatever, and they still had the old spec sheet, and everybody else had the new spec sheet, and then we had another situation where sales had the correct spec sheet, and other people don't have the correct. So we're tackling that now.
Well, you just brought up
And then
just
automation and manufacturing.
and the need for internal communication, right? So when you have 60 people, the whole they'll hear it by rumor, right? When you have 10 people, you can pass information around that way. But once you have 60, you have to actually have a plan and a regular communication. You got to repeat it a few times before people actually hear it. And so that's kind of marketing as well, right? You had to really be thinking about like, how are we gonna, if we're making this big change, people aren't necessarily gonna be like, woohoo, we can't wait to adopt, this R-based system. You have to kind of market it to your people so that they understand why you're doing it and how it's going to improve their lives, right? So there was a lot of thought given to that too.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we want to engage all of you in questions, and through the IO system, we've got some questions that are popped up on the screen. Sarah, you can help me with that? Let me read them before they get popped up. They're on my screen. So the first question we have is, what are some programs, systems, and technologies you use today that you would recommend to others?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah. I don't know, you put it to Bob. Yeah. No, whatever you want.
Probably, I would have to say that the easy one for me to answer would be the EOS. We haven't been very good at it. It's taken us a long time. Like, I know a lot of people, when they tackle EOS, they'll ramp right in, and within a year they're up to speed on it. We still struggle with the rocks, and so people that don't know what EOS is, it's every 90 days we have departmental planning sessions and we have leadership team planning sessions, and those are from an annual planning session where we determine the goals for the year and what those metrics are. We struggle with the rocks, and early on I used to just be like, well, we just have to get it done. But we have a lot of people that work really hard every day, and they put in a lot of time, and the pace is frenetic. I tell people when we bring them in to interview or whatever, we did just under 2,700 jobs last year we shipped out the door with 50 people. And everything, majority of what we're doing is custom. But the other part of EOS, so I do an annual report out in front of the entire organization. Every quarter I report out what we did, where we're going, what's working, what's not working. And when I started that, I wasn't very good at it at all. But you can get a lot of credibility as a leader or a business person from that. So I stood in front of my organization in January and basically told them that I felt that I had failed them last year as a leader because I coasted most of the year making excuses and waiting for everybody to catch up. And it affected us. It cost us in things that we were doing, because I took my eye off the ball on a couple key areas, and some of our things started to slip. But it gives you that human interaction with people on a quarterly basis. Lets them know where you're going, what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve. So I would probably recommend that most. Just even if it's certain aspects or fundamentals of that you adopt.
Great. The next one at the top are there areas outside of the CEO typical role which you have found to be too important for you to delegate to someone else, and why?
This is up for debate in our organization. And maybe Bob can attest to this. I still do all the pricing for our organization. I price every job that goes through the door. And so now we've streamlined it. Nobody waits more than 24 hours for pricing. I can price jobs at times in less than an hour if a customer needs it, from the time we get the first request to an hour. But because of the customization of our work, I can look at a job and know that nobody else in the country can do it. And if we're going to do that job, we might get 100% margin on that job. We might get 200% margin on that job. I can look at another job and know that there's some key notes or somebody's asking a key question and know immediately that we have competition or somebody's in there. And so I haven't given that up yet, but that came up in our annual sales meeting, if there could be some leniency in that. Now I let Bob price stuff. Bob has that leeway, but still at times Bob wants me to take last look on jobs. And if I'm traveling, Bob will price work for me. But at some point I'm going to have to figure that out.
So that might be one of those strategically ignoring things that we've been talking about. Yeah.
You can talk about that if you want, Bob, if it works or doesn't.
No, it works. I mean, you've done a good job of it, but for us to keep growing, I'm always concerned that you should be spending your time working on bigger picture stuff. But it's worked well, and somehow he does it. I just don't want him to get burned out because he's working. I mean, I don't know. Do you sleep? You know?
But you're frustrated with your boss, is this correct?
Oh, wait,
No,
is this going to be
not on
Dr.
record
Phil
saying
all of a sudden?
No, he does a great job with it. Now, he gives some of the senior reps more leeway and the autonomy to price their own stuff. But in general, if I have a job where I want to win, I'm going to go to Jim and talk to him about it.
Great. Next one, the next one was really about when you already answered, so I'll jump down to the next one. What were the keys that signaled you to when you needed to make significant change? Was it obvious, or did
I thought it was. You know what I mean? I just, I don't know. I only know myself or whatever, you know what I mean? So I've always been pretty humble that, I'm not a marketing expert, I'm not a sales expert, I'm not a CEO expert, I'm not a finance expert, so I'm always analyzing what needs to change. And I can joke about how I don't like changing, but I do understand the need for change. And I talk, every year that we've probably been business, I tell our organization we're not going to be doing the same thing that we did last year. Something's going to be different. And we pretty much have led to that.
So this just speaks to how you communicate with your staff as you make changes. So how do you convince others who may not be early adopters to get on board with new ideas? How do you do it? You talk that you've done it. You've learned that you need to do it. How do you do it?
Early on, I was probably one of those people that was a driver. This is what we're going to do, and then that ties back into that need for change. And then you get to a point that you look around the room or your organization, and you have everybody sitting there looking at you, waiting for you to tell them what to do, and you thought you hired all these good people that were going to help you, drive this business forward, but then you've spent a year pretty much dictating to them what they need to do, and the good ones leave because they don't want that. So then you have to understand that you're not a manager, you need to be a leader. And what does leadership look like? So then you take input. Is there a compromise? Can we come to an agreement? I spend more time now. Again, my days that I have one-on-ones or I do things, I go home exhausted because that's not my personality type. But now today, instead of me bringing somebody in the office and saying, we need to do this, this, and this because of this, get it done, I might spend 45 minutes or an hour helping that same person come to that conclusion, and then they think it's their idea, and then they go run and they do it. Now I'm exhausted after that, but they're fulfilled and they have what they need, and they're feeling like they're impacting the business every day. And again, it's the power of numbers. So if I have 10 people that feel that way and they're helping drive the business, or if I go to 10 different people and dictate what I want done, and then they walk out all pissed off, and well, Jim's telling us what to do again, and this and that, I'm fulfilled, but they're all deflated. So it's been a change over the last 5 years.
One thing I've seen you do really well is help people see why now, right? So again, you used to kind of just because I said so, right? But tying it back to the vision and reminding them that we're going here, and if we're going here, we can't do this the same way, and this is the why, and just explaining that why over and over and over again has been really, I think, a big change that I've seen in how you've been able to get more people to come behind you and help support you instead of you running up the hill, right? There's a whole team of people running up the hill now, so that's been a big change.
Great conversation. My staff's telling me I got to shut up and move on. But I'm just in summary. I mean, this panel is about having peers and partnerships and getting input from external sources. But for me, with the transformation or the sort of reason for success that I see is a headstrong leader who evolved and recognized that you can't be a headstrong leader, that you actually have to partner and listen to other smart people, and you've got great talented people inside and outside the company who you've now trusted, and I think that is the path to success. So my congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Jim, Marissa, Bob, and Danielle. Let's give them a little round of applause.